Hello everyone and welcome. My name is 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗆𝗃𝗏, your host for this edition of the Strategy Remix. Thank you so much for joining. Great to have you with us, and we have a very interesting topic lined up for you, and looking forward to having your input, comments and suggestions as we go through the program. If you'd just like to give a thumbs up just to confirm that you can hear okay, that'd be great. And Kai, great to have you with us. Oh, thank you everyone for the thumbs up. Really looking forward to this one. So I'd like to firstly introduce my co-host and fellow panelist today, Mohammed Salim. Mohammed, would you like to introduce yourself,
Hey everyone.
please?
So thank you so much, Samar, for having me. So my name is Mohammed Salim. I've been in the tech industry for 5 years, both in the pre and post-sales cycle. Where in the pre-sales cycle, what I did was introduce to clients the value of technology and how they can implement technology to improve sales and reduce costs. And in the post-sales, where I help customers extract the technology and make use of it in the best way possible. And most importantly, this topic is really important for me because I'm a sneakerhead. I'm actually a collector of Jordans. I try to buy Jordans when I can, and I have almost 6-7. Like I make 6x times the amount I make from Jordans, and I'm a big hype beast, as they call it.
Wow. Thank you for that. Right. So you are perfectly qualified for this topic today about sports marketing. I want to share with the audience, the inspiration for this topic came that actually Mohammed and I, who are friends in real life, we went to see the movie recently, Air, which is a business movie about marketing. Now, how often does that happen? I think maybe Mad Men is about marketing to some extent, but that's not a movie. So how often do you get to go to the cinema to see a movie about sports marketing? And actually, it was really, really good. And to give you a quick recap of what that's about in the context of this talk, I'm just going to set the scene for you. Then I'm going to play an audio version of the trailer in case you're not familiar with the movie, just to give you a feel about what was happening in this particular story, which is going to help us frame what's happened in sports marketing in the past and what the future may hold. So in terms of framing this, the movie is based on true events that happened in 1984 that address the origin of the Nike Air Jordan shoe, which in the movie tells a story of the Nike executive who goes out to strike a bold business deal with a relatively unknown 21-year-old rookie basketball player named Michael Jordan, whom at the time very few people had heard of. Now, this movie stars Matt Damon as the Nike executive and Ben Affleck as the Nike founder and CEO, Phil Knight, whom he has to convince throughout this story to go ahead with this very risky proposition. So just remember that back in 1984, perhaps very few of us have memories going back that far, although I admit I do. Nike was an upstart brand. It was not the global colossus it is today. So this was a growing business, but at the time was focused principally in the athletic footwear, in the running market, and was not very present in basketball. And so there was a push by Nike to see how they could get themselves into this marketplace. So it does make for an exciting movie, believe it or not. So I'm just going to roll the trailer to share with you, if you haven't seen the trailer at all or the movie yet, what is the story about. So, roll trailer.
1984 has been a tough year. Our sales are down, our growth is down.
Sonny, I brought you in here to grow the basketball business.
People don't know what the hell a Nike is.
What's a Converse?
NBA All-Star shoe.
There's nothing cool about Nike.
You would have to have a pretty compelling pitch.
I can tell them the one thing the other companies can't compete with. Our basketball division is terrible.
I do not love it. This is where you come up with a brilliant idea that no one else can see. Let's hear it.
I found them.
Who's that? Jesus? Can't afford it.
I'm willing to bet my career on one guy. My name's 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗆𝗏𝗏. I'm with Nike.
Do you typically make it a habit of showing up at people's front doors unannounced?
I don't like to take no for an answer.
Oh, man. Here we go.
You ask me what I do here. This is what I do. I find you players, and I feel it this time. Yeah, okay, it's risky. When you were selling sneakers out of the back of your Plymouth, that was risky. Don't change that now.
For a rookie?
Yes.
Who's never set foot on an NBA court.
That's the literal definition of rookie, yeah.
What's the plan? We build a shoe line around just him.
I need the greatest basketball shoe that's ever been made.
Who's the player?
Michael Jordan.
You show up at the house?
I believe in this son. I believe he's the future. And his story is gonna make us want to fly. But a shoe is just a shoe.
Until my son steps into it.
You got a name for it? Air Jordan.
I don't know.
Seriously?
Maybe it'll grow on me.
Wow. So that actually made for a great movie. And so I really, really enjoyed that along with Mohammed here. And you saw, some real standouts in that trailer. The business challenge, addressing sports marketing, trying to identify a new radical approach to position the brand, taking it forward with a rookie player, i.e. who's effectively unknown, or very new to the sport at that time, Michael Jordan, and taking a risk on that. And then also the process of going and trying to sign him up against a very competitive incumbent. Perhaps Kai can comment on that a little bit later. But let's get started on this discussion, right? So now you're a bit more familiar with the 1984 story and the movie and how that started to impact sports marketing. So, Mohammed, I'd like to get your view, as a keen sneakerhead, as an amateur historian of this particular period in Nike. In what ways was this deal between Nike and Michael Jordan groundbreaking?
So previously in basketball, what shoe manufacturers did and sports manufacturers did was they release a shoe and they just give it to athletes to wear. So, for example, Converse, Adidas would release their for example, Converse, their All-Stars, and give it to the best NBA players, and then they'd wear it. And that was their way of marketing it. But what Nike did with Michael Jordan was they created a shoe that was a signature shoe dedicated to him under his name that revolved around his brand and around his personality. And that was different than what other sports manufacturers did. So basically, the shoe reflected Michael Jordan's performance on court and off court. That was how different it was from other sports manufacturers and sponsorship deals. And what made it also special was that back in the day in the NBA, they only allowed white shoes. And this was edgy because they made it red and black. And they had to pay a fine. So when they had to pay a fine for every game, it made it even more desirable for the customers. And it went beyond just basketball courts. People started wearing these sneakers in the streets as a fashion statement. That's what made the Air Jordan special in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. So it broke ground in several ways, and I think, as addressed in the movie as well, spoilers, obviously they addressed this challenge to say they wanted to create a provocative design, one that stood out visually. And so having this red color scheme, as you said, was not in line with regulation. What the regulation said was that if a player wears a colored shoe, I think there's an exact percentage defined. If it exceeded that percentage, then the player would have to pay a fine for wearing those shoes. And so Nike, being aware of this, decided to subvert that particular rule by offering to pay the fines and ensure that their shoe, gained some notoriety and was visible immediately. Because the second the player steps out on the court wearing something that's completely different, visually, even from a distance, really stands out. And that starts to generate street credibility.
Yeah. And also, what they did was they made the colors of the shoes based on the team he was drafted to, which was the Chicago Bulls. And also, I wanted to mention that Jordan, at that time, took a percentage of the sales of these sneakers, which was unheard of at that time. So, for example, previously, they'd give Magic Johnson the sneakers, and they'd pay him a certain amount. He'd wear it, whatever they sell, all goes to certain brands. But with Jordan, he took a cut of the revenues of the Air Jordan sneakers.
Yeah, that was a very, very savvy move. I'd like to come back to that point
Sure.
in a little more detail further in discussion. It's a good reminder to the audience, if you have a question or comment, please do use the raise hand button or react as we're going. Great to have the audience participation. Of course, there's no live chat here, so the only way we can get you to share your comments is either to react with an emoji or please raise your hand, and we'd love to have you join us on stage to share your perspective. So, secondly, then, as this deal landed in 1984 and it started to have impact as soon as Jordan started to hit the NBA courts, you touched on this already, but how did this impact culture itself? Right, this is a very significant moment in almost in capitalism. It sounds a bit of a strong thing to say, but it created a whole new shift in culture. What was
So
that
basically,
impact?
Jordan became a superstar, and he became like an out-of-world character, and people wanted his sneakers as a fashion statement, and they were hard to get. So I'll tell you how I got my first Jordan. Actually, maybe it would help you and help the audience understand like what it means. So the first Jordan I got was in 2013 because I saw that these Jordans were released in the US, and I saw a long line for them. They were Jordan 11, a long line and queues for people to get them and people fighting over them. So it made me think, oh, I need these sneakers. So that's what made me go to Nike. And I thought maybe here in the UAE it wouldn't be as significant as the US. But what I did was, I'm ashamed of saying, I paid the guy in Nike 200 dirhams to save 2 sneakers for me, and I got them. So that's the thing. They're desirable because they were worn by one of probably the biggest name in the 90s, and people just wore them as a fashion statement and to show people that, oh, I have these Jordans. So it became more significant than just a basketball sneaker.
Right. Yes, you've got this cultural phenomenon where you have these shoes, but the combination of the athlete, the endorsement, the marketing starts to create this cultural impact. And it's not to say that sportswear did not have that before in the time before Jordan, but this was unique in terms of its genuine impact and how it really started to drive its way in the consciousness of consumers, right? So if we go back to the first principle here about marketing and what you're trying to achieve is to position your product successfully in the mind of the consumer. And in this case, Nike were able to successfully orchestrate several key things, not only the basic endorsement, as you said, for an athlete and for a sport, but then to start to transcend that from the court or from the performance aspect into a cultural and fashion phenomenon, right? This really starts to set a pace, which then others had to follow. And with that then comes other opportunities and new ways of understanding what a brand means and how people relate to that, right? Which was a kind of a breakthrough, perhaps even more so than Nike even intended. So, so with that transformation, that really sort of impacted upon the role of the athlete themselves in media and society.
Sure.
So would you like to
So
comment on
now
that?
athletes are more than just, like a basketball player or a football player is more than just, oh, I just go play and perform well and make my team win. The athlete now is more of a role model to aspiring athletes. So they have to follow, his person. They follow his lead in terms because people like to replicate athletes because especially they think that, oh, if I do this as the athlete, I can become a successful athlete. And so, especially when the athlete has a good story, these stories resonate with the overall consumers. So, for example, I want to talk about, for example, today, the best basketball player is a guy called Nikola Jokic, which if you're not a basketball fan, you probably never heard of him, but you've heard of LeBron James, who's an athlete that was drafted straight out of high school, 17 years old, drafted to his home team. drafted to his home team, that the Cleveland Cavaliers, that hadn't won a championship in 50 years, with all the pressure of bringing this championship to his home city. So athletes nowadays, their stories inspire people more than just, make my team win. So that's how the athlete evolved. So basically, previously, it's like, go on the pitch, play, go out, shower, go home. But nowadays, you have to be a role model to aspiring athletes as well.
Yeah, I think I can relate that to, perhaps a sort of what used to be the classics of 60s, 70s type model of athlete endorsements, putting their picture on the side of a cereal box and, as you say, putting the shoes on them, and that basically creating the connection between the athlete and success and the product, right? That was the initial thing. I know, having read about this topic over many years, this in fact goes back to bore my audience, goes back to Roman times, if not before, with gladiators who also had sponsors and people who wanted to be associated with their success. But that's a fairly loose connection, right? But when you spin it off now into this cultural phenomenon, it really starts to open up how people behave and think about the brand. And this is kind of an exponential effect, right, of sports marketing. You started somewhere, you've ended up somewhere else completely different in the mind of the consumer. So one spin-off effect of this campaign was the expansion of the global market, right? So at that time, in 1984, the NBA, Michael Jordan, etc., even Nike were essentially North American focused. So how did you see that change, based on your historical understanding?
So basically, previous NBA commissioner David Stern, what he said was he gave credit to Michael Jordan of expanding the NBA globally. Because what happened basically was, in the 90s, in the Olympics in Barcelona, they created the Dream Team, which played which previously the Olympics, only college athletes were allowed to play for the US basketball team. But when the Dream Team came with the best NBA players, all the world was watching. And one of the most thought out people that the people wanted to watch was Michael Jordan. And seeing him in the Jordans, and still the Jordan Olympics are one of the most sought out sneakers nowadays. So that's what helped elevate the NBA and Nike to the global scene. And not just,
Right, yeah, I mean...
And not just within the basketball world. So also another example of this was in 94, when the World Cup was played in the USA. What Nike did, they saw how huge the world of football is, and they had no penetration in football, soccer. So what they did was they wanted to see football through the biggest footballing nation, which was Brazil. So what they did was sign the Brazilian national team. And in the last World Cup, if I'm not mistaken, they sponsored the most jerseys out of the World Cup national teams, the previous World Cup in Qatar.
Right, exactly. I mean, it has huge spin-offs globally, and how different cultures and sports are treated today. A quick reminder from our producer.
You are listening to The Strategy Remix. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand and we will get you on the live audio. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Natalie. Please, if you have a question or comment, Kai, as you've been patiently listening, I know you are an expert on this topic, so please do raise your hand. We'd love to get some of your insight on this. Just while we're waiting for any questions or comments, one other angle worth exploring here is that how this deal and subsequent follow-ups impact the balance of power traditionally between these elite players and the sponsor. What is your view around that?
So nowadays, now the sports brand is part of the athlete, and the athlete is part of the sports brand. So nowadays, this opened up beyond this specific industry, many cross collaborations across, beyond athletes. So rappers, singers. So now singers do collaborations with fast food restaurants. You see furniture manufacturers doing collaborations with fashion, big fashion houses. So this opened up the collaborative marketing between not just cross-industry marketing, which was unheard of back in the day.
Right, yeah. And I think one key thing here is how the individual players themselves, as individuals, now start to negotiate directly with these sponsors or brands to set the terms of their engagement. So as you said at the start, traditionally, brands had effectively given the shoe for free to the target players, and obviously some money to go with that, and that was deemed sufficient. But now you had a situation, as you mentioned earlier, where someone like Michael Jordan or Michael Jordan's family negotiated a percentage of sale into the contract, right? So a percentage of gross sale, which was unheard of at that time, at least in sports marketing. Now, this particular approach was present in other types of marketing, famously in Hollywood, for example, where actors would take a pay cut and say, okay, I'm happy to take a pay cut for this particular movie, but I'll take a percentage of the gross, assuming that, this will be successful. In some cases, it paid off spectacularly. And in Michael Jordan's case, right, he negotiated this percentage in perpetuity. So even now, and obviously still very much alive, I understand he's collecting in the order of $60 million a year from Nike in annual sales, because his products still continue to be produced, branded, rebranded, refashioned, etc. But according to the contract, anything that Nike sells with his name on it, Jordan, he gets a percentage of that. So $60 million a year for something you signed 35, 40 years ago is pretty
Now,
good, right?
like mentioning the number, it seems, like he should have gotten more. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I looked it up, right? Yes, the original deal value that he signed was $500,000, right? This original contract with Nike. So he got $500,000, a percentage, and a few other additional things. But $500,000, I looked up, in 1984 is worth around $1.5 million today. So at that time, a very, very significant sum, if not was one of the highest sums paid to an athlete at the time. But worth contrasting that to where we are today, and which kind of starts to dovetail into the next section. And Kai, thank you. I'll promote you to the stage in a second. The current, I understand, highest paid Nike athlete is Rory McIlroy, the golfer, who has a 10-year, $100 million deal. So that's in the order of magnitude 200 times more. But that's where we've progressed. Kai, welcome. Do unmute yourself, and it would be great to have your comments on this.
Can you hear me now? So
Yes, we can.
thank
Welcome,
you.
Kai. Good to have you.
Hey, Salim. Hi, how are you doing? I think it's very interesting what about the whole story, and I think it's totally right with the Air Jordans. The signature shoes really got a boost, and maybe even the kickoff. On one hand side, I don't want to forget about the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 soccer boot, which I think was released in the 70s already, but obviously in a different contract setup. But that was at least the idea, also in a different sport, to have the name of the star also on the shoe. But I think definitely you're fully right that the kickstart of the signature shoes were with the Air Jordans, absolutely. And I think there was then afterwards really a battle the next 15 years roundabout to get the greatest and best athletes and provide them with their signature shoes. I remember that Tracy McGrady was very, very successful in the early 2000s, but I think today nobody's talking about that anymore. So really Jordan at Nike created here some kind of an era. I'm not sure about the soccer number of teams supported. I thought that the past Puma has already always the highest number of participants, but I think they only won with Italy in 2006. But you're fully right. It's a very interesting market and very globalized with I would say big four at the moment, including Puma, Adidas, and Under Armour together with Nike, and it's really fun to listen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great, Kai. Thank you for that. And I think it's worth mentioning. I did look it up in preparing for this. I did do a little bit of research. Your alma mater, Adidas, has the world's largest agreement in soccer with a deal value of $1.284 billion with Manchester United. So that's we are sponsoring, obviously, not just the individual athlete, but the whole team, the organization. So I'm sure there's a lot of complexity in that. But you've gone from just sponsoring an individual or just the boot or the shoe to sponsoring the whole team, which is a whole different ball game, pardon the pun. But I think Adidas holds a record currently at 1.284 billion. Nike has a slightly larger one with a different sport, which is with the NFL at 1.44 billion. Right, so these are some incredible numbers. Thank you, Kai. Rash, welcome. Do you feel free to unmute yourself?
Hi guys, thanks for adding me in, and really interesting conversation so far. I just wanted to add that, the comments that you made around obviously Nike and Jordan being the first of its kind, and I think you can certainly see Nike set the standard there and continued it with other sports like you mentioned. But, looking at football, for example, they did a similar thing with players like Ronaldo. So they created like the R9 boot, which was significantly around his boot. And it's continued today to even, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi. So other brands have obviously followed that pattern and that trend. I just have a question for your thoughts, really, is if you were, I know you stated there about the original deal and being over 35 years ago and so on. I think more recently now, maybe the trend may have been, if, for example, let's say Jordan, was negotiating that deal today, do you think you would have approached it differently? Because you quoted some numbers there, but, given the overall value of Jordan and revenue is in the billions, and you stated about 16 million is making each year, do you think, he would have taken, obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but, what his approach would be in today's day?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think Kai would have an opinion around that. Before I ask Kai to comment on it, I think, as shown in the particular movie and in this particular case, right, it was a rookie. So there's no background and no one necessarily knows this individual, so someone's taking a risk on that. And then there's been dozens of deals the last few years now. Every year you'll see Nike, Adidas, and others will now be chasing the rookies coming out of college or university or whatever, trying to sign them up even before they've played a single professional game, right? And so this chasing the individual whom they think could be successful in the future, this has become almost a template. Where you have an established name already and convincing them, enticing them to switch brand, for example, or someone progresses through their career and hits the big time, I guess, see the template of, for example, those players who progress into the Premier League or progress into a successful World Cup side, etc. Their fortunes change overnight, and they may have had a middling sponsor before, and now they'll have a spectacular one, right? And again, there's a gold rush around that. But I think it's very much horses for courses. If that's the wrong analogy here, it depends. I think, in my view, obviously on the cycle in which you're engaging that athlete and how much effort and money may go into that. Kai, would you have a view around that in your experience?
I hope my driving is not too loud, or you can still listen to me. I think it was a very smart move to make this a percentage contract for Nike. On one hand side, it reduces the risk in case of failure, and for Jordan was good afterwards because it was so successful. He earned really a fortune on this one, but from a pure initialization of the contract, to make it on a percentage and not to pay a fortune up front for the player. What I suppose, when I remember the campaign, it must have been 83, 84 from Converse with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, where they had their signature shoes, one in purple and yellow, and the other one in green and white for the Boston Celtics, and of course the first for the Lakers. I guess they paid a fortune for the guys up front, and for the new campaign with Jordan, based on percentage. This is then also for both sides a risk mitigation. it paid off for Jordan last year, but it could have been also different. One caveat to a whole sports marketing in that direction is, the personal marketing, what happened with Adidas and Kanye West just last year. This is then the completely different story that you can also lose some money if I would say have bad luck in the runtime of a contract.
Yes, right. I think there's a well-known story there. It's not quite sports marketing, but yes, related to that, absolutely. Celebrity marketing and all of that, and things
it could
go wrong. As you're talking, I'm reminded.
As it was with Adidas, and it's part of the last resort sports fashion marketing, and it could be very much the same if it's a player. I don't know these endorsements, but it could be also that a player would have different objectives compared to the brand which is paying.
Right, exactly. And people can go in different directions. The individual may end up in some sort of scandal or misfortune or whatever, and this can impact it. I'm just thinking of two words as you were talking earlier. In my research, I looked up one of the recent big deals the last 15 years or so was Anna Kournikova. Nike paid $70 million for her services, which didn't add up to anything. Best wishes to Anna. I'm sure she's happy and doing very well. But I'm sure if you remember that, that was a huge endorsement that didn't progress from a performance perspective as Nike hoped for. David, great to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Samar. Thank you, Mohammed. Pleasure to be listening to this brilliant conversation. First off, just wanted to thank Kai for reminding me of Tracy McGrady. I mean, that was what a blast from the past. Who could forget being down by 12 points with 30 seconds to go and then winning with a single point, clock in as the clock is winding down, all by Tracy McGrady. If you're not familiar with the reference, do yourselves a favor and Google Tracy McGrady comeback game. It's one of the greatest moments in sports history, in my opinion. But I think you've covered some really, really incredible use cases and topics today. For me, there are two areas that are interesting in terms of where sports marketing is going. One is perhaps that the barriers to entry are so dramatically lowered because of technology. I mean, I can easily see an up-and-coming athlete or rookie of the year or something using generative AI like Midjourney or DALL-E to do some kind of hypothetical collaboration, and then using his clout as an influencer to get backing for it, sort of saying, who wants to see this collaboration come true? Me and my talents, X some kind of brand that I could collaborate with images to go for. And as soon as you have that clout and that support, then you are one step closer to making it happen. And the second one I wanted to mention is I could also see digital twinning of athletes, using their facial features, their voices and so forth to interact with fans and, in an advertising sense, interact with buyers in a much more engaging and personalized way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's extremely valid, which brings us on to the second part discussion. I think we've got around 10 or so minutes left, but you're absolutely spot on. I mean, now that you've evolved into this digital twin environment, you can have avatars, you have image rights, you have video games, you have AIs, you have all sorts of things, right? And going back the history of sporting greats to the present and beyond, this creates a whole new spin-off. If you want to have the image rights to Muhammad Ali, for example, or Babe Ruth, or whatever it may be, I'm sure there's someone somewhere who's willing to license those to you for the right price for you to use. I was reading an article just yesterday about the use of Marilyn Monroe, and it's completely different from sports marketing, but the image rights of Marilyn Monroe was sold by her family to a conglomerate, I think around 10, 15 years ago. And now they're used to advertise various products, even now in her voice, with her image, and now put through AI. So Marilyn Monroe's image is not dead, and she's selling perfume on Instagram. She even has an Instagram account. Now, all of these things have been licensed, whether the person is dead or not, but they're still collecting their their royalties, which is now owned by a conglomerate. I think Elvis Presley's family as well sold his rights to the same conglomerate. So look out for a new Elvis Presley movie soon. But you're starting to see, this digital twinning and how it can spin off into multiple directions in sports and beyond. So I just wanted to bring Mohammed back on this, right? In terms of, we start to look at the future, right? And as David was touching upon, where do you see the impact now with kind of Gen Z marketing, personalization, getting much more direct and intimate, if that's the right phrase, with the customer?
Sure. So these, so sports manufacturers specifically, they try to tailor different products based on the different needs of individual customers. So, for example, in football, and because Rush mentioned a very nice topic, which was the R9 shoes. So, for example, Nike today have 3 different shoes tailored to 3 different types of players. So, in the football world, we joke around like we can know where the player plays by his cleats. So, for example, Nike have a speed boot, which is the Mercurial, which started with the Ronaldo R9, and now Cristiano Ronaldo wears it and Mbappe. So it's a winger type of player, a fast player. They have the Venom cleats, which are known for shooting. So that a striker would wear them, which is like Harry Kane from England. And they have the Tiempo shoes, which are known for being the touch sneakers, which were famously worn by players like Pirlo, Ronaldinho. So now with especially sports marketing, they try to tailor different products based on different needs of individual customers. For example, in tennis, they'd have different rackets for different types of players. And Phil Knight has a nice quote that says, and I might mess it up a bit, but it goes along the lines of this. So Nike is a marketing company, and our best marketing tool is our products. So it shows that marketing and sports manufacturers, marketing is a big part of these sports manufacturers, and it runs in their DNA.
Yes, absolutely. And this then spins off, as David was talking about, into the digital realm. We have metaverse, and I can't believe we waited so long to say metaverse. From what I'm seeing, the metaverse is kind of dropping out of fashion a little bit, perhaps a little bit too soon, but there's still potential there. Esports and gaming, again, as David was alluding to, having that digital twin, maybe even up-and-coming player, laying claim to fame. And we're going to start to see people becoming famous through esports and achieving sponsorships. And I think this is already starting to happen. So, you're seeing now sports sponsorship and marketing evolve even into the esports domain. And even to call it esports to some people, it would seem a little bit daft, but no, it's now considered an endeavor. And some of those players are now achieving that same sort of popularity and mind share with their audience that perhaps athletes of previous generations did. Aisha, great to have you back. Would you like to meet yourself and share your point of view?
Hi, everyone. So I guess I don't know a lot about sports marketing or Air Jordan, so this is really helpful to hear different perspectives. But I think from a consumer point of view, when I witness this cultural phenomenon, oftentimes I think, who would buy something so expensive or stand in line for so long for shoes? And I think that brands just investing in people and in their stories rather than having a product focused approach has proven to be effective on every scale. So even on a smaller scale, I see like bloggers and influencers and regular people using social media to promote certain brands and products and services. And so I guess the question that I think about is, it's no longer just restricted to famous people. And how does it work now? How should brands promote themselves now that everyone is has a platform and everyone is sort of a promoter of the brand, right? and people who are more famous, then should we be holding them more accountable or having some checks in place to see whether their values align with the company's values? I mean, they also have a social responsibility there then, right? So I guess these are a couple of points I've been thinking about during this talk, and I wanted to share it with the group.
Sure, thank you. They're very valid. I think there's 2-3 points there to dissect. Kai, I'd like to get your opinion on that in terms of, for example, the personalization. So now effectively everyone is marketing themselves now, right, on Instagram, as Aisha was saying. So being in the apparel industry yourself, Kai, where do you see the opportunity for organizations to personalize their product to these individuals and position them?
Well, that's a very good question. I just thought when we start talking about individualization, I was just thinking, that's maybe not really what the Air Jordan is about, because I think that's something where really the masses want to wear, and I have also not the feeling that Generation Z or even Generation Alpha is really so about individualization. So there is definitely a very good market share where people want to have more customized, more fitted to themselves, especially when it comes to functional fitting. But there's definitely also the big portion of I want to be part of something. Just think about what Supreme made so successful some 4 or 5 years ago. That was kind of a tribe building, but definitely not with individualized or customized products. So I think both is required.
Right. Yes, and I think as Aisha was alluding to there, ensuring that the ethics of the individual and the brand are aligned. I think that's always going to be a challenge. People evolve, people get into different situations which aren't always aligned to the brand, and things go wrong. I think if you think of a famous golfer and a shaving brand, or the same famous golfer and Nike, one brand decided to part ways because of various issues. The other brand decided to stick with them, and make of it what you will, right? And sometimes notoriety itself goes a long way. If you market yourself perhaps as a bad boy, that also has sometimes its own appeal. Nice guys don't always win. I'm afraid this is one of those lessons of marketing. Well, David, I just want to get...
Do you know if that
yes,
Nike
please.
building on campus is still named after the famous golfer? I don't know. I just know that it was named in the early 2000s to him, but I have nothing read about a renaming or confirmation in either direction.
Good point. I'll ping someone on the campus there to confirm what it's called now. I know that in my hometown where I live today, there was a planned golf course in the name of that individual, which was then quietly changed. David, as we start to wrap up, to get your perspective then, as a strategic advisor, as a value advisor, where do you see the role of this in the ultimate bottom line of organizations? Where would you advise them to invest in the future in terms of driving marketing forward to reach the consumer?
Well, that's a great question, Samar. I mean, I would invest in data, and I would invest in making sure that my data is as precise and as uniform across the enterprise as possible. And alongside of that, of course, there's a technology investment to be made as well. But I think data is what's going to drive a lot of this conversation going forward, together with the technological innovations that we're seeing specifically in the area of generative AI, lowering barriers and transaction costs all around.
Yeah, perfect. I absolutely agree. And I think, David, I'd love to have you back on a future edition of Strategy Remix. We can delve more into that generative AI topic. But for now, just to wrap up, Mohammed, any last observations?
Yeah, no, thank you for so now, as you mentioned, now sports marketing goes beyond the sport itself. So it has to be, the use of, your social media. Like the most followed person. I read somewhere that Cristiano Ronaldo probably makes more money, not with his latest contract, out of Instagram, because he's the most followed athlete, he makes more money out of Instagram than football. That was previously. So, you know, personal branding and personal marketing branding now, because of the Jordan deal, went to another level. Now, you can't just be good at your sport. You have to be a good role model. You have to be able to build your brand. So because, you know, as an athlete, there's a time limit for athlete. There's an age limit. After certain years, your body starts to slow down. So you have to look beyond that. And that is what athletes and sports marketing does for these athletes nowadays.
Right, yes. If you can get to that level, you know, it's a very potentially lucrative deal, you know, that will serve you well beyond your athletic days and beyond. And in fact, even the brand still might stick with you as you enter a post-career beyond that. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. Really appreciate your kind attention. Stay tuned. Look out for future editions of the Strategy Remix. And if you have any questions, comments, want to find out more, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to take that up with you. So with that, thank you so much. And I'll let Clint play the outro. Thank you, Clint.
You have been listening to the Strategy Remix with Sanmar Faruqi. Many thanks to our panel for taking the time to join, and to you for your kind participation. Look out for the recording of this session on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you would like to be a future panelist, have an idea for a topic, or any follow-up questions, please drop a LinkedIn DM to Sanmar. Remember, you cannot predict the future, but you can help make it. Start today with the Strategy Remix. Don't forget to connect or follow Sanmar. Thanks again.